Hey YouTube, thanks for checking out my channel, and today I'm going to tackle a repair on my truck that has been needed to be done for some time. And that is a set of coil springs I installed on the truck aren't the exact right ones, and I'm going to show you why. So stay tuned and you're going to see exactly what's happening. And it's a 95 F150. It's an XLT, extended cab, long bed, two-wheel drive, got a cap on it. And I replaced these coil springs some time ago. And I'll show you what the problem is. I've got coil stack or coil bind, as you can see, and I've purchased the correct springs. These are the ones that this truck calls for. It's a standard non-towing package two-wheel drive truck, and I've had this problem for some time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get the towing package springs and install them instead of these springs here, so you can take a look at what the difference is as far as once they're installed, how they look. Okay, so obviously the first thing I've got to do is get this thing jacked up in the air, supported on jack stands, and I need a couple of jacks. You can see here I've got those standing by. I'm going to be working out in my driveway just because it's a sunny day out and it's a little bit easier to shoot video out here. So I'll go ahead and set this up and we'll see what we can get. I'm going to get the tires off this thing and up in the air, and I'll come back. I'm going to take a jack and I'm going to support this lower assembly here, which includes the spindle and of course the I-beam. And then I'm going to raise it to take tension off of the shock here. And there's a bolt that I need to remove from the shock. Okay, so the head of the bolt that holds the shock on and the nut on the back are both 3/4 inch on this application. And I have the jack compressing the spring slightly so the shock isn't in its fully extended position. So let's go ahead and zap that off. So I got that off. There's a washer that's on the back side. Make sure you don't lose that. And there you go. I'm gonna have to put a little lubricant on that because it's getting rusty like everything else on the truck. Now that I have that lower shock disconnected, basically, I'm gonna go ahead and remove this bolt also for the sway bar, and then I'll allow this to slip out of its little yoke area and drop even lower. So let's go ahead and do that. And the socket that actually takes off that nut down there is 1 1/8". Now I'm just going to drop this socket in there. Yeah, it pretty much landed on it. And you see it fits perfect. Now at this point you could put a ratchet in here. You can also just use a breaker bar. I mean, that'll fit in there. I have enough extensions that what I'm going to do is I'm going to go from the top all the way down to that socket. Okay, so I got the coil spring removed, and at this time it's a good idea to check your insulator here to make sure it's in pretty good shape, which this one, although wore, it's in good shape. If you live in the Northeast like me, in the Rust Belt, to inventory what you got going on with your spring mounts. Make sure that they don't need replaced. Again, it's a good idea to take a look at everything at this point, make sure everything looks pretty stable. Hey YouTube, I wanted to give you an update here on what I've been doing. Now, I was showing you how to remove the coil, which the coil's been off for some time and the other side's been off, and I was going to go ahead and jump into how the coil was being reinstalled or what it looked like. However, I realized whenever this was off, it'd probably be a good time to go ahead and replace the bushings for the radius arm. So I went ahead and I purchased a set of Moog replacement. It's just OEM replacement. I'm going to put the link down below for that. You can see here you go here. It's a K8361. This fits a lot of different Ford vehicles, especially on the F-Series truck, but also some of the Explorers too. What you're going to do, even though this is flipped up and out of the way, you don't need to take that off. I just did that. You're going to disconnect that front sway bar bolt to allow this front to move forward. Of course, your coil spring's going to be out in your shock, like I had mentioned before. You do not have to disconnect your steering. That can stay on. And you do not have to disconnect your I-beam that runs over to the center of the car. That can stay connected. What you do is loosen the nut that's on here, which is very difficult. In my case, it was really rusted. And then find a way to move this all forward. Now, it's going to take more than just pulling on it. You may want to run a ratchet strap around something in the front. and around the I-beam and pull it that way. Or if you want, and you have it, I use the porta power. And what's really nice about that is I can just put this in here between the bushing mount for the radius arm, the bracket, to the frame, and then pump this up and push against the I-beam, and it'll bend it right out of the way. I'm going to put the link also down below for a porta power because they're really cheap at Amazon. I picked this one up years ago and I've been using it for quite a few things. This truck was totaled and I used it to push a lot of the body work back out. I'm going to show you what these bushings look like going back in. The instructions that come with the Moog bushings, they're very clear on how they're to be put back in as far as the stack order. And once back in, then I'll just go ahead and reinsert this. So we'll keep on getting this back together for you and I'll show you the final product. Oh, before we go, I wanted to show you my new coils. Now these things are 0.713 or 716 bar diameter, which is exactly the same as the one that I had before. It's the exact same height, which I think installed it's 13 inches. So overall it's the exact same spring, but it's rated at 1,440 pounds, where the ones that were on there before were rated at 1,240 pounds. So I'll get those in, I'll get everything bolted back up, and we'll look to see what it looks like overall as far as the stack on these coils and if it's changed at all. Alright YouTube, quick update. It is the next day, and the reason it's the next day is because I got another problem. I want to show you what I got done so far on the passenger side, and then we'll move over to the driver's side, so let's go do that. Okay, so here's the passenger side, and you can see the springs in place. Everything looks pretty good. The pockets seated well as far as the spring. Everything went good back here. The new bushings are in. Everything's tightened. All good, right? I went ahead and reconnected the sway bar, and just went ahead and I used that porta power again to actually push this I-beam back into its seat relatively hard, and then tightened everything. So we're good there. And I of course disconnected the shock, you can see there, and I'm getting ready to disconnect the sway bar. And as I'm trying to loosen this nut, which is extremely rusted, you can see the nut is rusted on the control arm, but as I was pushing it down with the breaker bar, this arm was just twisting, and the reason is it's like paper thin in these spots. Obviously this needs replaced, so I guess I'll be able to show you how the radius arm comes out. This comes loose, so what I'll do is I'll disconnect this here, just loosen this. I think this is like an 18mm, and then this pocket will come off with some prying. Once you get this spring perch off the radius arm and the I-beam, you can see I had to break the bolt on that because it's so rusted. This is what it's going to look like. That bolt there needs to come out, and that bolt passes all the way through the I-beam. As you can see, it's rusted really good on there. I mean, it's pretty much chemically welded through the rust. And you can see down here, here's the head of the bolt again, which passes through everything, and I don't know if it's going to be successfully extracted. So what we'll do is we'll just go at it. I just wanted to show you what it looks like on a very rusted vehicle. Alright, so welcome back, and this is how far I've gotten. You can see that I used my cutoff tool and my grinder to just get down to the threads of the bolt, and I just barely touched the threads on the bolt with the grinder, so this bolt should be okay. There's a couple of flat spots on it, but I think overall the integrity of the bolt's okay. But as you can see, the bolt's not out yet, and the reason I was trying to save this bolt is it's like $20, $25 at Ford, and I know that I have a local industrial supply house that probably has this bolt, but it's like 10 inches long. It's a 3/4 inch bolt, right around there. I'm sure it's a metric of some kind, and it's like a 10 pitch on the threads. So what I did is I soaked the bolt with PB Blaster, of course, up top and then all the way down. You can see there's quite a bit of rust scale on it. So I have no doubt that it's rusted inside this I-beam to some extent, but I don't know how much. I don't know if it's enough that I can get it to come loose. So I'm going to soak it for a little while. Alright, just an update, YouTube. I had to use this pipe with a breaker bar and then the socket, which was held up with the floor jack. I soaked it in PB Blaster for 30 minutes, and I had to use both feet on the pipe holding onto the bumper so I wouldn't push myself across the driveway, and I finally broke it loose. So you can see I've got my new control armor radius arm, and it's got a protector over the threads, but there's a big difference between the two as far as the way that it looks, and that's because this one, look how twisted up it is. Just from me trying to take off the nut, this thing just folded like a cheap lawn chair. So I'm really glad that I found this problem whenever I was doing the coil springs. The other thing I have to do is break these bolts off. I'm sure they're rusted past the point of getting removed. Transfer this bracket over. Now, just to let you know, this is for an F150 95, but this covers a lot of different Fords, and they are the same left or right. It's the same part number, which nobody really indicates that. And I was trying to make sure that I had the right, the correct side that I was ordering, and they're the same. They're, like I said, symmetrical. They have holes on both sides for the shock mount, and the bend is the same for both left and right. So I'm going to put the link down below for this. Click the link. It's going to take you right to it. And wow, what a huge difference. I mean, just the feel of it, I can tell. It's just such more solid. This thing sounds like a tin can versus this sounding like a real piece of, bent steel. All right, YouTube, here we go. I got it all installed as far as the radius arm itself and the bushings. Went ahead and torqued this down. I've got to find a bolt for the sway bar. I've got to find some bolts to mount the saddle for the shock mount. And once I do that, I should be set. So let me go hunt down some bolts, and I'll bolt a little bit more together, and we'll come back. All right, so I got it all back together. Of course, I need an alignment at this point, but you can see that stack is gone. Finally, after all these years of having those other springs, that these two coils were always stacked on top of each other, I've got a gap there. I've got the radius arm in place. Everything's bolted down. Everything looks really good. I'm really happy with the way it went back on. The sway bar's reconnected. I've just got to torque my lug nuts. It's always a good idea. If you do not tighten these evenly, it will put a stress on the rotor that will cause the rotor to warp whenever it gets warm under braking. I believe that there's going to be a time in which I'm going to have to drive this and let these springs settle. I've talked to some guys at alignment shops, and they said if you put new components on, it's probably a good idea to drive it for a little while, as long as the alignment's really close, to let everything settle, because that spring will move around inside those pockets on the top and the bottom. Even though they're held in place to some extent, they will move around. Now I can already tell that my truck is setting more level. I didn't really care so much that the front end was a little bit lower than the back end to some extent. These trucks are usually 2 inches higher in the back than they are in the front. What I'll do is I'll drive it around for about a week or so, go down some really bumpy roads, put it to a little bit of a test, and hopefully everything will get seated, then take it to the alignment shop and have them straighten everything up and set it for the new springs and that new radius arm. Well, I appreciate it as always, and if you have any questions or comments, I'll try to answer them best I can. Sometimes I get a little bit behind. And if you would like to see more of these videos, or if you would like to see all my other videos, go ahead and go through my other videos and check them out. What I'm going to do, again, put the links down below for all the parts that were used and tools that were used in this video. If you want to buy those, click the link. It'll take you right to Amazon. You can purchase those relatively cheap. I really don't find much for lesser prices, especially when I get free shipping in 2 days. And subscribe if you like this video, and I'll try to get more on like it. Thanks. Bye.